Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us this week is Andy Kloc, Director of Software Engineering at Ghost. And, well, thank you for joining us today, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Luke. I'm really happy to be here.
Would you like to give us a quick intro about yourself?
Sure. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Andy Kloc. I have been inside of the software engineering industry for a little over 20 years now. I feel very fortunate in that I've kind of found my niche in the industry, doing primarily kind of like engineering management, leadership type stuff. Really like working with earlier stage companies and kind of growing out engineering organizations from your 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people up to 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, et cetera, and all the problems that are kind of embedded inside of that. So how do you hire the right people? What are the right amount of processes that you put inside a place? How do you balance process with creativity? That kind of thing. So my current company is a Ghost. It's a really cool inventory marketplace out of Los Angeles. We recently just received our Series C, and yeah, life is good. Life is good.
Great, yeah. When I saw the topic that Chelsea proposed, which is beyond fake agile, it's really resonated with me because I've been I grew up quotes after when I graduated, I did 4 years of consulting in a big four. Then when I started working at a programming and engineering outfit, we were doing very strict agile. Like it was 2008, 9. Those were the years where we do everything down to the burned out chart and point system, and it taught me a lot. But on the other hand, sometimes it felt like I was doing work for the sake of work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a balance there, and I'm very curious to hear what you think about the process, what agile used to be, what it is now, and everything between.
Yeah, so agile is kind of funny. It's such a loaded word nowadays. It means so many different things to so many people. So when you start talking about agile, I almost feel like it's important to kind of come to a common understanding of what are we talking about here. So to me, agile is all about acknowledging this McKinsey study, which basically said, I mean, this is a pretty popular one. It came out, I want to say, about 10 years ago. But inside of this study, McKinsey found that basically 70% of all large IT projects fail, right? And they tended to fail for things like alignment and not being aligned with the business or having a good understanding of what their customers wanted, et cetera. And to me, Agile is it's less about process, and it's more about acknowledging that most of the times when we set out to build something, oftentimes we end up building the wrong thing, or we end up building the suboptimal thing. And what Agile espouses doing is basically taking that tension or that concern that you're building the wrong thing and putting it into a productive state. So rather than taking a waterfall type approach where we try defining all of the right requirements up front and all of the right kind of functional specifications, technical specifications, et cetera, Agile pushes more for a try something small, put it out into the world, get feedback, see how you're doing. And if you're not building the right, if you're building the wrong thing, that's okay. Take a step back, try again, and then keep on iterating and moving forward. And I think that step of not getting feedback after you deploy something small out of production is where the vast majority of Agile implementations that I've seen kind of go south. And instead of focusing on that simple idea of let's put something small out and make sure that it's working, we tend to fixate on things like process theater. So, to your point, are we using burn down charts, and are we using planning poker, and do we have all the right ceremonies, et cetera, set up? And to me, I think those things are actually distracting from the main point of Agile, which is, let's put something small out, make sure that it works, and then keep on going. But actually demonstrating with our customers that the thing that we're building is the right thing for them.
Yeah, it can feel like the work is actually doing the ceremonies instead of actually doing the development. Like, okay, so now all my charts are in place. We've done all the planning. We have all the t-shirt sizing done. Great. Then someone has to do it, guys, at some point. So and where do you think? So why do you think traditional agile practices can fail? Like, why? What's the common pitfall? Is then feedback? You say?
Yeah. So I think I tend to pick on some things. I tend to pick on things like planning poker, and burn down charts, etc. But I don't necessarily think that those are bad tools. I think the problem with the tools is that we tend to get distracted by them rather than focusing on things that are important, like how do we get feedback? So if we're working on something, we have our sprint goals set up. How are we actually going to measure that this thing is working inside of production? Or do we just skip that step and it's just on to the next sprint? I think oftentimes it's the latter, right? We just move right on to the next sprint. We're not getting feedback on the thing that we built, and therefore we're denying ourselves that opportunity of, did we make the right thing? Should we double down on this, or are we going down the wrong path?
So, how do you think we can adjust the agile processes to get closer to, I want to say, business value? I mean, I grew up as an engineer. Now I'm more of a hybrid sales, so almost product role. So it's to me, it's very valuable when I can take something that engineering has built and put a lot of hours in and just say here that the customer's happy about it. So how to align all the components?
Yeah. So I think you just touched on something that's really important, which is as engineers, I think something that really drives us is seeing our work out in production and delivering value. And I think tying the work that your teams are doing with that sense of accomplishment, with that sense of, great, we've actually helped someone out, is how you can start to establish some of that feedback back to the engineering organization or the team that's building stuff. So for me, it's as simple as starting with the question of, how are we going to measure this? How are we going to make sure that what we're building here is the right thing? And asking that very often. So asking it at the beginning of every sprint, or at the beginning of every ticket. How are we going to measure this? Are we going to use metrics? Are we going to use are we going to use user interviews? Are we going to leverage a beta group? So all of that stuff kind of dovetails into having feedback mechanisms set up within your organization that you can consistently lean on and use on really kind of a week to week basis, I would say.
Okay, that's, yeah. I think that's so. Let's get more into some concrete cases, which I like to people start to frame situation. What do you think are some common metrics you could look at? Like, okay, I want to measure this. How do I measure it?
Yeah, well, what we primarily do at Ghost, and I've done it at different companies, is you lean on basic technologies such as events. So we use Segment, which basically emits events out and says a user clicked on this thing, or a user spent this much time on a page, and we can use those types of metrics to see, we thought that we were going to drive traffic over to this new feature. Are our users actually using this right now, or are they bypassing it altogether? So that's a really simple kind of passive way to get some feedback. But I think honestly, the most important thing about that, it's not necessarily the mechanisms that you establish that get you to those metrics. It's taking the time on the team to say, we should go and look at this right now. So I think oftentimes teams actually have this data, but
Mm.
culturally they don't have it kind of built into their system to say, we deployed something, let's keep an eye on how this is actually performing out inside of production. So there's the tooling part of it, but there's also like the cultural piece of it as well, if that makes sense.
So yeah, so it's not really a, well, I think that's a good metric. Like, are people using this? Is probably the best metric you can have.
Yeah, and metrics infamous for basically being able to be gamed in certain ways, right? If you're optimizing too heavily for one metric, you might hit your metrics, but are you accomplishing the actual end goal that you were striving for? So I think coming up with the right types of metrics takes a lot of practice. So something that I try to tell folks who are getting a little bit more into feedback is, give yourself a lot of grace when you start off here, because you are going to measure the wrong things, or you're going to measure things the wrong way, or you're going to miss those edge cases. So give yourself grace. It's something that you have to really spend time kind of learning and practicing with.
I think you touched on a very good point. People think of Agile as being for actually developing software, but the whole process around it should be Agile. Like, even defining those metrics, defining the feedback flow, everything that's not purely technical needs to be iterated on in itself. Like, the first loop of your metrics might be so far off it's actually breaking the rest of the system. So you need
Yeah.
to iterate on that. It's really. And speaking of iteration, one big problem that every team has, even when they're doing agile and they're doing it maybe the old style or whatever, is okay. So we have this 2 week sprints. Everybody has their own 5 things to do, and a customer comes up with a request that's worth millions of dollars for the company, but it needs to happen now. So how do you balance that? How do you even handle that these days? Because you get a lot of pushback from teams generally. Like, how do you manage uh, pivoting between things I'm doing now and things I need to do tomorrow because it's very important for me to do them tomorrow, and I can't wait for 10 days?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it goes back to setting up a culture of we derive our sense of accomplishment, our sense of wins, not by delivering code or flipping feature flags on, but we get that sense of success by actual customer outcomes. So if you are constantly measuring how are we doing with our customers, is the stuff that we're building, does it matter? I think what you'll find is if you see those types of opportunities present themselves, where it is we have a feature in front of us that our customers really want or that can make our stakeholders really happy,
Mhm.
teams will tend to jump on that and get really excited about it. I see this all the time. So we're fortunate that we kind of have a dedicated user interviewer within our organization, and she goes out, she regularly talks to our customers, and then she basically gives feedback to the entire team about how we're doing and what our customers are seeing, the things they're asking for. And more often than not, when she's talking about the things that our customers are looking for, there will be all kinds of side conversations over on Slack along the lines of, we could do this in just a couple of days, and man, I want to go home and POC this thing right now. So I think most of the time engineers really do want to, they're looking for those opportunities to kind of make a difference. So the more that we can kind of socialize and show these things, then I think that definitely helps lead to a more generally productive culture that wants to do well for your customers and your stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that's a it's a good point that people maybe it's the problem that we just brought up. It's actually the reverse. You're right. Sometimes it's not having to pivot to something new, but almost preventing people from doing it.
Right. Right.
There's I think that's another cool. Well, sprints are trying to prevent that, but yeah, it's this one is this a new thing. Is a new feature. It's cooler, and instead, if I work on this as a developer, I don't have to work on some old obscure technical debt that I know I need to go do, like updating a library that's been there since 2016 and actually needs a refresh. Nobody, it's boring. It's got 100 references in the code base, and you have to go through all of them and change it. So why don't you do this cool thing instead? You're right. It's the reverse is probably more. I don't want to say problematic, but it is it can be a hard well problematic ownership. I think that's a good jump then. Like, how do you empower your developers and involve them into this? Because what I've seen personally, and I remember feeling this back at the start, I somehow understood what we're doing, but this can be almost, I don't want to say dehumanizing, it's too big of a word, but for some people, they feel like every day I just got a log into my whatever tracker I'm using. Here's the thing I need to do. It's like you get to punching it in very fast. So how do you make your developers part of the cycle again?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's very important for us as a startup organization. So our development organization, our EPD organization, it's something like 30 or 40 people large. So as a startup, it's very important for us to make sure that everyone is kind of keyed into the same goals and that we don't have, I guess for lack of a better word, too much distance between the work that we're doing and the actual customer impact. So we are actively seeking to connect developers, engineers, everyone on the team to the customer outcomes. So honestly, we tend to hire for engineers who have a product based mindset, who are really
Mhm.
interested in moving into that space of, I understand what the problem is, and I have a few different types of solutions that I could offer that maybe gets us to like that end solution where we can learn something really quickly. So the way that Ghost actually operates is we don't operate in 2-week sprints. We use a system
Oh.
that's very similar to ShapeUp's Basecamp.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar with that, so basically what ShapeUp is rather than using 2-week sprints, it espouses an approach of 6-week cycles. And the idea with the cycle is you take on a project and you basically try to get as much done on that project within those 6 weeks, but you have to deliver something. The dynamic that this sets up is that your time is always fixed, which means that your scope has to be variable. So what we do, let's say that our mission is that we need to build some sort of a mechanism that can get users from point A to point B at 30 miles per hour. I mean, what would a tech conversation be without some bad automotive metaphor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the developers come together with the designers and product to say, I think what we're talking about here is a car. And we think that what we should build is a Lamborghini because because we're in technology and of course everyone wants a Lambo. So what the team actually does is rather than starting with the front fender of a Lambo and then moving their way back, they acknowledge, wait a second, there might be some inherent risk in doing that because we might run out of time and we have to deliver something by the end of the 6-week period. So rather than starting with the front part of the Lambo, they build a go-kart. And they deliver the go-kart to a group of customers, like a small group of customers, obviously just a set of beta users to build an understanding of, we think this is generally what you're asking for. We're not done with this, but we want to make sure that we are on the right path. And the beta customers come back and they say, yeah, you're right. This isn't exactly what we want, but we can see where you're heading. It's great that we can move at 10, 15 miles per hour, but really we want to go 30. And honestly, we kind of want to be able to bring a bunch of our friends along with us. So we want to have room for 6 people. So the team gets this information back and the engineers say, okay, actually then I guess we don't want to build a Lamborghini. What we really want to build is maybe something more like an SUV, something that can carry some people. So this is an important moment because we deployed something very small out to our beta users, and our users told us, you're generally on the right path, but really this is where you need to go. If we had built the entire Lamborghini, then we would have delivered it to our customers and they would have said that's the wrong thing. So now the team takes that back and they say, all right, we have our go-kart. Maybe our next step is we build a minivan because we don't want to run out of time. Like we're still bumping up against on time. We build the minivan, we ship it out to the customers. They say, this is great, love the flip down DVD and the big, the wood paneling on the doors and all that other fun stuff. But also we kind of would like to be driving a Mercedes and it would be nice to have like some seat massagers and we don't want to be driving a minivan. Okay, so the team takes that back and they say, we're going to run out of time, unfortunately. So we can add a few more niceties, I suppose, to the minivan, but we're not going to be able to get to an SUV. Time runs out and the team stops. And the great thing about running inside of the cycle model now is that we've delivered something of value to the customers and we were learning things along the way, even though it was only a 6-week cycle. But because we've hit that 6 weeks, now we're forced to ask ourselves a question, which is, should we continue and build the Mercedes, or is what we've built good enough? And I think what kind of the helpful concept here is that done is nebulous. And Agile, I think, it's as much about knowing when to stop and to move on to other projects as it is making sure that you're building the right kind of a thing. So that's the kind of connective tissue that we build within our teams, is really like talk to the customers, derive your sense of satisfaction from the things that you are that you're doing and how much they're enjoying the product.
You're right in that done is probably only a definition you can give to very small features or even a single method or whatever. Like, of course, if I need a way to delete the record that was not put in the UI to begin with, once there's a way to delete the record, that is done. There's no more iterations to do on it. Although, if you think about it, maybe you can find something. But
Yeah.
I'm still interested. So it's interesting how a 6-week cycle is longer and still allows you to stay flexible in your applications. But still, let's do the scenario. While you're building something in the 6-week cycle, something important comes up that will take a week out of the team's time and needs to happen. Do you account for that in planning, purposefully leaving you some extra time, or do you adjust by reducing the output for the cycle? I think that's a very common case. However you size your sprints, if it's a 6-week cycle, maybe okay. So guys, I don't know, the servers are down. I need the whole DevOps team to come help me. They're not going to be available to build the backend for your minivan media player. It's just not going to be there. How do you handle that kind of event?
Yeah. So in general, I think it's important that whatever process you're using, it's kind of married to the realities of the environment that you're working in, right? So of course things go wrong, and of course we have to loop back at times, and we have to take care of some of those critical bugs. I think what you want to do is you don't want to start a cycle or a sprinter or kind of whatever process container you're using with the naive perspective that there's not going to be interruptions. So the way that I tend to handle that is to set aside X% of time. We need to make sure that we have sort of some super agile time, I guess, right? Like what are the options, or what are the issues that are coming up? What are the critical issues that we need to save time for? And that also goes with enhancements. So if we get feedback that there is something that's really small but very impactful that we can build, like, do we build time inside of our cycles for that? And the answer to that is yes. So we do generally set time aside for that.
Mm-hmm.
At a larger level, all of our teams are not necessarily marching inside of these same kind of 6-week cycles. So we do have a mission team and an innovation team whose bread and butter is send us some of these super fast kind of features or issues that we can kind of take care of, so that the other teams can get more into like a deep workflow kind of state, and that's something that really helps us out as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reality of our work that, given that we all work at startups, scale ups, whatever, not established companies. I always joke to my friends that people that work at Cisco or IBM are in a different line of business than we are. Like, it's not just that they're almost not the same work. Even if you're programming, you're doing it in a so much fundamentally different way that the whole thing is different. Like, it's the time constraints that are placed on what we're trying to do, budget constraints, team size constraints, are fundamentally changing how we operate. Like, I program a certain way. I will not program the same way if I was in a team of 100 people working on the color of a button.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we are always trying to figure out what is the best ROI. There's an army there's entire backlogs built up of the good work we can do, right? Like we can go back and we can take care of that library from 2018 that's old,
Mm-hmm.
2016, and get that cleaned up. There's a little bit of UI polish that we can add here and there. There's more tests that we can run. I think the real art though is having that holistic view of what is the best work that we can be doing, and are we constantly looking for what the best work is? So another thing that I really like about this 6-week approach that we use at Ghost is that it forces us to reevaluate the entire product roadmap. Oftentimes I think we put product roadmaps together and they go out months and months, and even quarters and quarters, and that feels good, and obviously it's beneficial to to the main stakeholders, the board, et cetera, wants to see like what is the direction of the company. But at the same time it can kind of lull us into a sense of we're doing this next thing because it's on the roadmap, not because it's necessarily the most impactful thing that we could be doing at this moment. So at the end of that 6-week cycle, we get to ask ourselves, all right, we built the car. The next thing that we think that we need to do is build the boat, but is that still the most important thing at this moment? So I think just constantly evaluating ROI at every level, at the product roadmap level, at the ticket to ticket level, even at like the line-to-line code level, becomes very important. And all of that stuff is dependent on understanding what your environment is, what the business environment is. So the more connectivity you can maintain between the business and everyone on your team, the easier it is to kind of make those types of evaluations.
Yeah, it is. It is very, very important. I think it's probably the most important part is balancing the cycles with other things that might happen and balancing them with business value. What we mentioned at the start is probably something we should go back as a closing remark, which is how do I make my developers aware of the value they're creating? That is a common problem. I hear this as a sort of a manager or whatever. I hear this every time from other friends, colleagues who are in the same line of business. My developers do deliver very good code. It's fast, it's bug free, works very well. But sometimes I go ask them and they barely know what it was for. How
Yeah.
do you make your engineering team aware of the value they're creating in non-technical ways?
In known technical ways. So I think metrics are a good start, but something about actually talking with your end users hits at a fundamental kind of emotional level. So I would absolutely start there. Get some of your users on the phone and ask them if they could talk about some of their experiences, how some of the features that you're putting out, how it's made a difference for them. And I think basically everyone who has worked on those types of projects and gets to see, like, from the end user perspective, here's the difference that you made for me. It's an incredibly powerful thing, and I find it an incredibly motivating thing. And it doesn't have to necessarily be that tough to set up. Find a few users that are amenable to talking with your team, and oftentimes I think users will be really excited at the prospect of being able to work more closely with your team. So involve them inside of beta groups, right? Like have a set of users where we can deploy a feature out to and hide them behind a feature flag so only they have access to it, and they will give you super valuable feedback as you go along. But if you can establish that connectivity between the team that is doing the work and the actual value that they are driving, you will get to that ROI awareness much more quickly. And I think that's where you start to grow your culture out of, are we working on the best thing that we can be right now? And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, you're effectively almost doing internal customer testimonials. So get a customer that likes the product, have them explain why they like it, and it's a dual use. Like you can use that in marketing and whatnot. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Actually, just make them, in a sense, yeah, seeing what you're doing in the world and people telling you, hey, this saved me $1 million, or this made our team work much faster, or I could take an extra day of vacation with my kids because I didn't have to work as much. I think it's a very, very good remark. I never thought of that. Like having just using its internal customer testimonials. It's
Oh, and then take it farther than that, Luca. So you have your testimonials, great. Ask these same customers if they would like to participate inside of some beta functionality that you're going to put out inside of the future, because you would love to get more of their feedback. Like, this is how it starts. Just get bring the customer into the teams as much as you can.
yeah, that's a very good insight. Cool. Well, thank you, Andy, for joining us today. I mean, it's a great chat. I always love talking agile and development processes and the pitfalls, and there's a lot there. And thank you for. I mean, that's really, really very, very insightful. I think it's especially interesting to bring back the 6-week cycle you're using, which is Basecamp shape up, right, or some variation on it.
It's definitely a variation of it. I probably said some terminology incorrectly, but yeah, start with Basecamp's shape up model. I think
Well,
that
I assume DHH is not going to worry too much.
I hope not.
It's busy racing cars at the moment, so there's no.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, Andy, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Luke. I really had a good time.
Andy Kloc, Director of Software Engineering at Ghost. We spoke about Agile and a lot of interesting cycle and remarks, how to make your developers engaged, how to help your customers. And it was a great chat. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
For the rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.